This lesson is on 1- and 2-step equations. The parts of an equation are shown here. The number that is multiplied to the letter, as you see here, this number, is called the coefficient. And then, of course, the letter we refer to as the variable. The number that is added or subtracted out here is called the constant. All right, with one-step equations, to solve a one-step equation, isolate the variable by using inverse or opposite operations. For two-step equations, the first thing we're going to do is use addition or subtraction to remove the constant. The second step is to use multiplication or division to remove the coefficient. And then, just as a reminder, a little tip, if we're dividing by a fraction, that's the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. Okay, solve the following one-step equations and show all of your work. So looking at this first problem, we can see that we have x divided by 1.5 equals 16. Well, with one-step equations, we want to look at what's happening to the x, and we want to do the inverse of what we see happening. So this says x divided by 1.5, so the inverse of division would be multiplication. So we are going to multiply both sides of the equation by 1.5. Remember, when I say sides of the equation, here's the equal sign. So we have the left side and we have the right side. And what we do to one side, we have to do to the other to keep the equation balanced. So we're going to multiply both sides. And you can use a little dot out to the side like that, or you can put it in parentheses like this. So we're going to multiply both sides by 1.5. Now this is like 1.5 over 1. So on this side, on the left side, these are going to cancel, and we're going to be left with x equals, and then all you need to do is grab your calculator, and you are going to do 16 times 1.5, and you should get 24. And so that can go on your line right here, x equals 24. If you would like to double check your answer, you can always take what you believe x is equal to, or whatever the variable is that you're solving for, and you can plug it in up here. So if we think x is 24, you could take your calculator and do 24 divided by 1.5, and you should get 16. If you don't, then your answer or your solution is incorrect. This is called your solution here. Okay, let's look at number 2. Number 2 says 12n. That means 12 times n. So that's multiplication. So if we want to solve this, we have to do the inverse of multiplication, which would be division. So we are going to divide by that coefficient, which is 12. So we're going to divide by 12 here. That's on the left side of the equal sign. So we're going to go to the right side of the equal sign and divide by 12 on this side as well. Now we know that 12 divided by 12 is 1. So we are left with 1n, which is really just n, if you want to just write n, equals, and then 42 divided by 12, grab your calculator, is 3.5. And so that answer can go right there. Number 3. This says 6/7 e equals 12. 6/7 e means 6/7 times e. So the opposite of multiplication is division. Now let's talk about this. Don't write this down yet. If we were going to divide by 6/7, so that because any number divided by itself is 1, we would need to divide this side by 6/7. And that starts to look a little If we go back up here to our little helpful tip that we have, it says that if we're going to divide by a fraction, that is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So what that means is, instead of dividing by a fraction, we can actually multiply by the reciprocal, which the reciprocal is just, you just flip the fraction. So it would be 7/6. So what we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. Now let me tell you a couple of things here. When we do that, if you look at this, the whole point is to get the 6/7 to cancel or to make 1 so that we have 1e and just have the e by itself. Now look, 7 times 6 is 42 and 6 times 7 is 42. So 42/42 is still 1. So that still accomplishes the same goal here. Okay, so we can do this and we'll have our e left by itself. Now, a lot of times kids will make a mistake at this point with this 12 times 7/6. I would encourage you to put a 1 underneath it and then multiply straight across. So 12 times 7 would be 84, and 1 times 6 would be 6. But double check that and divide 84 by 6 to see if you don't get a nice rational number. And you should get 14. So therefore, e equals 14 is the solution. Number 4. Okay, so we see g plus 3½ equals 10. So we see that we're adding 3½. So the inverse of addition would be to use subtraction. So we're going to subtract 3½ on both sides. Bring down your g. 3½ minus 3½ makes 0. It goes away. Equals. And then 10 minus 3½ you should know how to do that on your calculator, is going to give you 6½. I would pause this and make sure, if you didn't try it already, that you understand how to plug in 10 minus 3½ on your calculator. So therefore your answer is g equals 6½ or 6.5. Number 5, this says t minus 4.25. So the opposite of subtraction is addition. So we are going to add 4.25. Now remember, we just did that to the left side of the equal sign, so we need to do the same thing on the right side of the equal sign. Negative 4.25 plus positive 4.25 is 0. So we can bring down our t equals, and then a negative 4 plus 4.25 is going to leave us with 0.25. So that is my answer. Number 6. Now this one is a little bit tricky for some. So we see negative 6 plus m equals 3.6. And a lot of kids see this plus sign, so they want to subtract. But let's think about this. This is a negative 6 that we need to remove. So how could we remove a negative 6? Now this is addition. We are adding a negative 6. But if we were to add 6 to that negative 6, would that make 0? It would. And so because of that negative 6, we're going to add 6. So then we need to come over here and add 6 over on this side. So negative 6 plus 6 is 0. We're going to bring down our m equals. And be very careful, if you are not using a calculator, that 6 is the same thing as 6.0. So when you add straight down, you get 9.6 as your solution for m. Okay, number 7, write and solve the equation modeled by the following. So first of all, here's our equal sign, here's the left side. So what do you believe? A negative x and a negative x. This would make how many negative x's? 2 of them. So we're going to have a negative 2x equals. And then what do you think about this side over here? What would that make? If you said negative 6, that would be correct. So that's your equation. So you're going to come right over here and you're going to write that as your equation. And then we're going to solve it to get our solution. So now that says negative 2x, which means negative 2 times x. So the inverse of multiplication is division. So we are going to divide by that coefficient, which is negative 2. And what we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. A negative 2 divided by a negative 2 is 1x, or just x. And a negative 6 divided by a negative 2 would be what? positive 3. Good, so our solution is x equals 3. All right, very good. On to number 8. Solve the following two-step equations, okay? So now there's two things happening to our variable m. We can see that we have a 9 times m right there, but we also have this plus 14 out here to the side. So if you go back to the notes tell you you have to do your addition or subtraction first. So we are going to get rid of that positive 14 by subtracting 14, then find the equal sign and do it to the other side. 14 minus 14 is 0. Bring down your 9m equals negative 13 minus 14 is a negative 27. And then we need to undo that 9. How is the 9 connected to the m? By multiplication. So the inverse of that is division. Remember, we don't do what we see, we do the opposite of what we see. So we're going to divide by 9 on both sides. And so m equals negative 3, which is our solution. Okay, number 9. And you know what? Actually, might be helpful so that you know you have to do your addition or subtraction first, is maybe it would be helpful to find the variable and box that in so that you know you save that for last. So like on this one, I should have probably boxed in the plus sign right here and save that for last. See how we brought that down? So we're going to save the term that has the variable for last. So therefore, the only other option, here's the equal sign, here's the variable. The only other thing on that side you're working where the variable is this minus 6. So what is the inverse of minus 6? Should be to add 6. So we're going to add 6 here, find the equal sign, go to the other side and add 6 over there. All right, negative 12 plus 6 is going to be negative 6 equals, bring down your n divided by 2, and then a negative 6 and a positive 6 makes 0. We still have one more step. That says n divided by 2. So the opposite of dividing is to multiply by 2. You can use parentheses or you can use the dot. Either way is fine. Remember, that's like 2 over 1. So these will cancel. You still have your n on this side. And then we need to think about what this ends up equaling here. We have 2 times negative 6. So that would be negative 12. So my solution is n equals negative 12. Now, it really wouldn't matter if you left it as negative 12 equals n or n equals negative 12. They mean the same thing. Okay, number 10. Let's box in that variable. So here it is. We're going to box it in, save it for last. So if this is the equal sign, the only other term on this side is this minus 16. So we need to get rid of that minus 16. So the inverse of subtracting 16 is to add 16. So we add 16 to both sides. Bring down our 1/2 b equals negative 4 plus 16 is going to be 12. And then we have to get rid of that fraction. Now remember, we get rid of a fraction, even though it looks like we want to divide because that's 1/2 times b. We can get rid of it by multiplying by the reciprocal. Remember, because then see how that cancels? So we multiply the other side by 2 over 1, which is really just 2. And we end up with b equals 12 times 2, which is 24. All right, if you want to pause this and try the next few on your own, I would encourage you to do that. And then you can start the video back up and check your answers. Okay, I would box in the 4w. I would subtract 15 since that's addition. I would bring down my 4w equals negative 13 minus 15 is a negative 28. And then I would get rid of that 4 by dividing by 4 because 4 divided by 4 is 1w. So that accomplishes that. And negative 28 divided by 4 would be negative 7. Number 12, box in the variable. Get rid of the plus 31 by subtracting 31. Bring down the d divided by 1.6 equals, and 40 minus 31 is 9. Almost done. We need to get rid of the divide by 1.6, so we're going to multiply by 1.6. on both sides. Now sometimes I use the dot for multiplication and sometimes I use parentheses. A lot of times I will use the parentheses if the number that I'm multiplying by actually has a decimal in it, because that can get very confusing. Let me show you what that would look like, and you can see maybe why I chose to do that. If I did this, that can get a little confusing looking with the multiplication and the decimal, so I like to just put it in parentheses like this. So this will cancel and we'll be left with D equals, and then you need to figure out what 1.6 times 9 would be, and that is 14.4. All right, number 13, box in that term with the variable. Get rid of the plus 19 by subtracting 19. Bring down the 2/3 b. 35 minus 19 is 16. And then we want to get rid of that fraction that's multiplied to the variable. So how do we do that? We multiply by the reciprocal. What's the reciprocal of 2 over 3? 3 over 2. So this is going to cancel, and we're going to have b equals, now this is 16 times 3 over 2. I'm going to put a 1 under there, and I'm going to multiply straight across. 16 times 3 would be 48, and 1 times 2 is 2. And 48 divided by 2 would be 24. So my answer is b equals 24. All right, number 14, write an equation that could be used to represent each situation and then solve the equation. On a beach trip, Lucy rents a bike from Wheels by the Waves, where they rent bikes for $12 plus $3 per hour. If Lucy spent $30, how many hours H did she rent a bike? Okay, so it's $12 plus $3 per hour, and remember H is representing the hours. So we could say that $12 plus $3 per hour, meaning for each hour. When it says per or each, that means multiplication. And then she spent $30. So that would be her equation. And then you need to take that equation and you need to solve it. So somewhere out to the side, you need to come and write the equation and you need to solve it. I would box this in and I would subtract the 12 on both sides. So I have 3h equals 18, divide by 3. So what does h equal? 6. So the solution is 6 hours. That's how long she rents the bike for. Okay, number 15. Paul is scuba diving and is 3.5 feet below sea level. Below, meaning under sea level. So that's going to be a negative number. He is descending. Okay, we should really start to take into consideration these words. He is descending. That means he's going further down at a rate of 0.5 feet per minute. If Paul is now at 12 feet below sea level, how many minutes has he been diving? Okay, so he's scuba diving and he's 3.5 feet below sea level. So that's going to be a negative 3.5 below sea level. Then he descends, so that's subtraction, at a rate. Rate is going to show us our slope. It's our multiplication. So 0.5 feet per minute. And we get to, probably, it looks like we get to pick our variable, but I'm going to use m for minutes, and I'm going to do 0.5 m. And it says he ends up at 12 feet below sea level, so equals negative 12. So that would be the equation, and then we're going to solve it. Hopefully you have a little bit more room than myself. I'm going to have to kind of move over here and copy the problem down. Oops. And I'm going to box in the term with the variable, save it for last. I'm going to get rid of this negative 3.5 out front by adding 3.5 because I know that will make 0, and then I have to go to the other side and add 3.5 to that negative 12. So this will cancel, and I'll bring down my negative 0.5 m equals a negative 12 plus 3.5, sorry, is going to be what? Negative 8.5. And then we can divide by that negative 0.5 out front. Those will cancel. And you should get 17. So it said how many minutes has he been diving? He's been diving for 17 minutes. All right, and number 16, write and solve the equation modeled below. I feel like these are pretty easy here. If we look here, we've got negative x's, and there's 3 of them, so negative 3x. And then we have 3 negative 1, so it's going to be a minus 3. And then we're going to use our equal sign because we've got our little balance beam. And then over on the other side, we see that we have 6 of the negative 1s, so that'd be a negative 6. And then we just need to solve it. So find some room on your paper. I think I'm going to go out to the side here. And remember, I'm going to box in the term with the variable. I'm going to get rid of that minus 3 by adding 3 to both sides because that's the inverse of subtraction. Bring down the negative 3x equals, what would a negative 6 plus 3 be? It would be negative 3, and then get rid of this coefficient. That's negative 3 times x, so the opposite would be to do multiplication. That is multiplication, so we're going to do division. We're going to divide by what we see on both sides. And so x equals negative 3 divided by negative 3, which would be positive 1. So the solution is x equals 1. And that is the end of the lesson. Say goodbye.
Goodbye. I love you.